This is the Dzogchen Semde Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi. This morning, let us explore the end of traditional therapy, walking meditation for PTSD, followed by group meditation. I think it would be wisest to begin with the neuroscience of PTSD. So PTSD is not a psychological problem. It's a physiological problem with psychological symptoms. And there is a huge difference. PTSD is not about being a coward. PTSD is not about being stupid. PTSD is not about stinking thinking. PTSD is not about disempowering beliefs. Make sure my silly face is on this. Okay. So what is going on with PTSD? Consider, if you will, our hippocampus at the bottom of our brain, adjacent to our amygdala, which is right here. So our hippocampus acts as if it was the guy at a club behind the velvet rope holding a clipboard. And if your name is not on the list, you're not getting in. This was explored quite humorously / tragically in that 70s show. So when a memory, a hippocampus acts as the doorman for long-term memory. And so consider, if you will, our body's ability to perceive. It sees, hears, feels, tastes, and smells. Until those experiences are processed by the hippocampus, the central nervous system experiences it as occurring in the present moment. Once the hippocampus has processed those perceptions, they are experienced as memories. And there's a huge physiological difference because we can think of a memory and it can be sad or it can make us angry. But a perception forces us to work with our dopamine-oriented survival instincts. When the body treats it not as a memory, but as a present moment experience, it's not thinking, this is sad. It's thinking, I'm in peril. And we have evolved to deal decisively with peril. Perhaps that is why we talk about the 5 F's. On some level, deep, down, when we encounter any phenomena, our survival region of our brain seems to ask, hey, that thing over there, should I feed on it? Should I fuck it? Should I fight it? Should I flee from it? Should I faint before it? Should I fawn over it? Although those 6 F's are wonderful for perilous circumstances, they are a horribly disempowering way for us to live our lives. So the real question is, what are we going to do to get our hippocampus to process trauma as a memory, to allow trauma into deep storage? The answer is surprising. The answer is walking in bilateral stimulation. Not too many decades ago, a psychiatrist was dealing with some personal problems, and she took a brisk walk, and she noticed that after the walk, her circumstances had not changed, but she felt better about it. Her beliefs hadn't changed, her memories hadn't changed, but she felt more resourceful. Upon closer examination, she observed two physical phenomena. The first was while she was walking, she was experiencing bilateral stimulation. So when she was swinging her left leg, she was swinging her right leg. And when she was swinging her right leg, she was swinging her left arm. So that's just the normal gait. But neurologically, it is as if it is massaging our hippocampus. Now, our hippocampus is not a muscle, it's an organelle, but sometimes it's useful to think of it that way. When a muscle is tight, sometimes it responds to heat and to massage. Similarly, our hippocampus seems to be less dysfunctional, and yes, I know that's a double negative, less dysfunctional when we are briskly walking while swinging your arms asymmetrically, which is the normal way of walking. She also noticed that when she was walking in the park and she was, keenly aware of the beauty around her, the trees and the shrubs and the flowers and the people and their pets, she was also aware of the doggy do, and she didn't want to step in it. And so she noticed this just as a natural way for an adult to walk in a urban situation is that her eyes were moving naturally to be aware and to sidestep fecal landmines, because that's a pretty unpleasant way to treat one's shoes. I think you'd agree. And she noticed and so she did trial and error. She began to notice that played a huge factor in her resourcefulness. She went on to describe a method known as rapid eye movement desensitization. So what are we to do with our brain while we're in walking meditation? The worst thing we can do is actively concentrate or actively contemplate. This will exhaust the front of our brain, the dorsolateral and medial prefrontal cortex, to the point of inducing us to present with symptoms of depression. No less further trigger our amygdala, the seat of both anxiety and aggression. So can you see the dark irony involved in trying to treat our anxiety and aggression with the type of active focus that will just make it worse? Fortunately, neither our amygdala nor the prefrontal cortex constitute the entirety of our central nervous system. Consider, if you will, our spinal cord. Altogether as a unit known as the nexus of our autonomic nervous system. It has a middle bit and it has peripheral bits, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But as a whole, if we take a break from our exhausting habit of actively competing against it, and instead passively cooperate with our autonomic nervous system, right away we'll notice that doing so calms the anxiety and aggression of our amygdala, as well as grants us access to at least a modicum of peace. Let's look at that a little bit deeper. Let's begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord. That could be described pretentiously as the nexus of our sympathetic nervous system. It has evolved to help us to notice in a very special way. It has evolved to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice mind's antics of perception, sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, as well as emotions, intentions, cognitions, recollections, imaginations, and the like. The full spectrum, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. Hey, how's about a rule of thumb? Here you go. Every time we silence, so here's a rule of thumb. The most efficient way for us to practice mindfulness is for us to silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this every time we feel our body inhale. So we're not actively focusing our inhalation, we're treating our inhalation the way a piano student treats a metronome. A piano student doesn't focus on the metronome. They're focusing on their posture and their hands and the keyboard and the sheet music. In the background, they're aware of the metronome. And that's what we're doing here. We're just letting our breath inform us. But the question remains, what do we do with all that gurk that we noticed? That brings us to meditation. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we have evolved to automatically access the tippy top and the very bottom of that same spinal cord. Together, these two regions as a team are known as our parasympathetic nervous system, or the nexus or hub of our parasympathetic nervous system. It has evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release during our exhalation to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even less graspable, at least for a moment, at least a little bit, until our next inhalation when the cycle begins afresh. How's about a rule of thumb? Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb rest, as we exhale. Let me rephrase it again. The most efficient way for us to practice meditation is for us to silently and mentally recite the verb rest as we exhale. So it's simple. As we're walking, silently and mentally, we're reciting this and rest. This is the universal label that applies to whatever we're experiencing, whatever sight, sound, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, whatever emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, or imaginings. That's the universal label. Rest is universal response. You might say, I don't feel restful. You're not lying. This is not an affirmation. Why is it not an affirmation? An affirmation is a lie we tell ourselves in the hopes that it'll make things better, but it doesn't. Rest is simply, we play with these two words, not to command our autonomic nervous system. It's already chugging away. We're playing with these two words to gently guide our intention to stop competing against our autonomic nervous system and begin cooperating with it. So here's the great irony. Meditation is just that simple. Let us conclude with some practical tips, some useful rules of thumb. If you are in great turmoil, I don't recommend going for a walkabout. Simply walk around your block. The less you cross the street when in turmoil, the safer you will be. If you encounter a neighbor and you and they want to strike out conversation, just here's a magic phrase. Yeah. George, I love you to pieces, but I'm doing some walking meditation to work through some shit right now. So I hope you won't take it personally if I continue on my way. 9 times out of 10, they'll say, "Oh, no problem, no worries. I'm right behind you." And here's the thing. And if they're nosy or manipulative and they want to pry, just say, "Dude, I gotta go. Love you loads. We'll talk later." Clapping your hand is very important. It will interrupt their neurological pattern, at least for a moment, and this give you a chance to continue walking. There will be times when you make a scary facial expression when you're doing this. So you could be going through it. You could be going through despair or terror or rage. And if people know that what you're doing is this is part of your way of treating PTSD, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be really supportive. This works for PTSD. This works for CPTSD. So PTSD is typically a one point in time thing. CPTSD is when there are a series of traumatic events, like a veteran from a war, or the survivor of child abuse or spousal abuse. This simple method of brisk walking meditation does not erase our past, but it helps us to deal with it. I have a plethora of disabilities. I have birth trauma brain damage. I have autism, ADHD, all the comorbidities, and a shit ton of CPTSD described or influenced by traumatic events beginning in childhood, but occurring throughout my entire life. I'm an old guy now, so I've had a lot of it. This is not uncommon for neurodivergence. I spoke to a psychologist who specializes in neurodiversity, and she said she's never met a neurodiverse individual who hadn't experienced trauma, just because the way our neurotypical world deals with individuals who don't fit their mold of how things should be. I've said all that to say this, not to lament and make you feel bad for me, but to let you know that I've used this. It helps. It doesn't change the past. It doesn't excise the memories, but it helps to process them. There is a wonderful acronym from recovery. HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Often fatigue and hunger can trigger episodes of PTSD. Going for a brisk walking meditation can help us not to have a psychotic break. Can help us not to yell at people who aren't there or start punching the walls, which is good. It's nice to get our cleaning deposit back. However, when you get back from your brisk walking meditation, have a snack, preferably a wholesome snack, because I got to tell you, caffeine and sugar probably won't help you manage your body and mind. But a wholesome snack and a rest is great after your brisk walking meditation. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up For Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible thanks to the generosity of viewers just like you.